Every morning, modern life surrounds us with comforts we barely notice. A twist of the faucet brings hot water. A tube of minty toothpaste waits by the sink, alongside fragrant soap and shampoo. We step outside feeling as clean as we can be. Yet many of us still need a cup of coffee before we truly feel alive. Looking back into the distant past, is it true that our ancestors spent their lives smelling terrible? That question, however, points us in the wrong direction. The real mystery is not whether they smelled bad. It is how they managed to stay clean enough to survive. In a world with no soap, no chemical cleansers, and no protection from modern medicine. Let's uncover the answer together. Let's begin this journey inside your own mouth. Right now, hundreds of species of bacteria are quietly living and multiplying there. Brushing your teeth every day does not eliminate all of them. It simply keeps them under control, much like managing a restless crowd instead of emptying an entire room. Ancient humans obviously had no toothpaste, no dental floss, and certainly no mouthwash. Yet when scientists examined ancient skeletons, the story turned out to be far less grim than the image we often imagine of mouths filled with rotten, decaying teeth. In fact, the greatest surge in dental disease came much later, when the human diet changed. Before agriculture, our ancestors ate an incredibly varied menu of meat, roots, fruits, nuts, and wild plants. But with the dawn of farming, that diversity gradually gave way to a diet dominated by grains and starches. It was this dramatic shift, not the absence of toothpaste, that caused tooth decay to become far more common. And so a strange irony emerged. The better humans became at baking bread, the better they also became at creating cavities. In the end, what you eat matters far more than the toothbrush you use. But that does not mean ancient people ignored their teeth. Long before plastic toothbrushes existed, humans were already using chewing sticks.
NANI?!
Small branches frayed at one end to scrape away plaque and clean between the teeth. Some, such as the traditional miswak, even contain natural antibacterial compounds that reduce plaque remarkably well. From a scientific perspective, a chewing stick is not primitive at all. It is simply a toothbrush that never passed through a modern marketing department. So that cool minty flavor you taste every morning has never truly been the smell of cleanliness. It is simply a modern invention, a fragrance we collectively agreed to associate with being clean. But if mint is not the scent of cleanliness, then what did the rest of an ancient human's body actually smell like? There is an old saying that sounds almost like a joke, yet perfectly captures one of the oldest survival rules of the ancient world. If everyone smells, then nobody smells. It is more than a clever phrase. It may have been one of the earliest social rules that allowed human communities to live side by side. Picture a small band of people. They lived together, worked together, and slept shoulder to shoulder through long nights. When everyone carried the same natural body scent, that smell gradually stopped conveying any information at all. It faded into the background, becoming as ordinary and unnoticed as the air they breathed. That is why ancient noses were never truly alarmed by the smell of sweat. Their sense of smell awakened only when it detected the scent of danger, the odor of a dead body. Contaminated water, spoiled food, or an infected wound. In the prehistoric world, those smells carried only one meaning: death. And danger was the only scent worth paying attention to. Yet there was one scent that surrounded humanity for hundreds of thousands of years' smoke. If you lived beside a fire every day, its scent would weave itself into your hair, soak into your skin, cling to your clothes, and settle into every corner of your shelter. To the chemically sensitive noses of modern humans, That smell might seem harsh and overwhelming, but to our ancestors, smoke never meant filth. It meant exactly the opposite. Smoke meant warmth. Smoke meant food had been cooked. Smoke meant other humans were nearby. It was proof that this was a place where the darkness and its predators had not yet taken over. Perhaps the oldest comforting scent in all of human history was never sweat at all, but the smell of a campfire. It turns out that scent was never really about being clean or dirty, at least not in the way we define those words today. Scent was a communication system. The only thing that mattered was the message it carried. But that raises an even bigger question. If our ancestors spent every day using their noses to read the signs of survival, and what other extraordinary abilities did that remarkable sense of smell make possible? Your sense of smell has never been just a way to notice an unpleasant odor. It is an extraordinarily sophisticated survival technology. Your nose tells you whether food has spoiled, whether water is safe to drink, whether a body is beginning to decay, and even whether a wound is healing properly or slipping into infection. In a world with no labels and no expiration dates, your nose was your guide, constantly reading the world one breath at a time. Nowhere was this instinct more obvious than in the way our ancestors chose where to sleep. At Saibudu Cave in South Africa, archaeologists uncovered bedding made from plants dating back about 77,000 years. They carefully layered fragrant grasses and reeds, then spread a thin layer of ash underneath. That ash was far more than simple padding. It created a barrier that crawling insects struggled to cross. This was not merely a pile of leaves, it was an intelligently engineered sleeping system. The story of clothing is told by one of the strangest witnesses imaginable: lice. Head lice live in hair. Body lice survive only in clothing, hiding inside seams and laying their eggs in fabric.
Bruh.
Genetic studies reveal that body lice split from head lice tens of thousands of years ago. That split could only have happened once humans began wearing clothes so consistently that an entirely new parasite evolved to exploit this brand new habitat. There's another subject few people enjoy discussing at the dinner table, yet everyone has wondered about it: waste. At El Salt in Spain, evidence from Neanderthal camps dating back 50,000 years shows that human waste was never left lying around carelessly. They understood that a campsite too close to waste quickly became a breeding ground for disease. They did not need modern science to discover that truth. A sensitive nose and one miserable week were enough to teach the lesson. Small. Mobile communities possessed one advantage that crowded cities would never have: distance. If an area became unsafe, they could simply leave. Cleanliness in the ancient world was never about comfort or smelling pleasant. It was about surviving long enough to keep smelling the world around you. And that simple truth leads us to an even more important chapter in the story of our ancestors: the bond between one human being and another. Hair was never something ancient humans simply neglected. It was combed, trimmed, braided, carefully searched for parasites, and even exposed to the smoke of the hearth to help disinfect it. Caring for one's hair was an ordinary part of daily life, as natural as eating or sleeping. We have even uncovered a fascinating piece of physical evidence from the past. On the famous comb from the ancient city of Lachish, dating back more than 3,700 years, someone carved a simple message: "May this comb remove the lice from the hair and the beard." And stop for a moment and think about that. These tiny parasites were such a constant source of misery that someone decided to carve that plea into an object meant to last for generations. One of the oldest personal messages ever left behind by humanity was, quite literally, a desperate wish to be rid of lice. But grooming was never just about hygiene. Among many primates, it serves as the glue that holds society together. It builds trust. It requires closeness. And it demands time. Two things that no one gives away casually. The moment you allow someone to touch your hair, your skin, or examine a wound on your body, you are sending a remarkably powerful message. Without saying a word, you are telling them, I trust you completely. There is no distance or hesitation between us. For prehistoric people, caring for one another's bodies was both a practical necessity and a deeply meaningful social ritual. In that ancient world, hygiene was never a private affair. It was something people did together and something they did for one another. Among our closest primate relatives, social grooming can occupy as much as 20% of every waking day. That time is not wasted. It is how relationships are built, strengthened, and maintained. Picture a family gathered around a glowing fire. Long before the first pages of history were ever written, a mother gently parts her child's hair strand by strand. A husband and wife quietly comb each other's hair after a long, exhausting day. An elder carefully checks a child's scalp while softly telling an ancient story. We can never know exactly what those moments looked like, but the pattern behind them was almost certainly real. Long before humans had the words to say, I care about you, they simply reached out their hands and cared for one another's bodies instead. And that raises an even bigger question. If grooming was humanity's first language of trust, what happened when people began using water, plants, and fire to take that care to an entirely new level? Soap is actually a surprisingly ancient invention. Evidence of soap-like substances has been found in Mesopotamia thousands of years ago. But humans had already been living, sweating, hunting, healing wounds, and raising children for countless generations long before that milestone. Without soap, they had no choice but to turn to nature for other solutions. Sand was used to scrub the skin clean. Wood ash helped strip away excess oils. Clay was applied to draw toxins and grease from the body. Water carried away dirt, and sunlight dried and renewed everything it touched. None of these were modern soap, yet none of them were useless. Ancient humans simply made the most of every gift the natural world had to offer. Small hunter-gatherer bands also possessed one enormous advantage that later crowded cities could never match: mobility. If a camp became too filthy or no longer felt safe, they simply packed up and moved somewhere else. Medieval cities centuries later had no such luxury. When their streets filled with waste and foul odors, there was nowhere to go. In the end, it wasn't intelligence that created the greatest difference in hygiene. It was population density. And here comes the strangest twist of all. If, by some miracle, you could bring an ancient human into your modern bathroom today, they probably wouldn't inhale the scent of soap and admire how clean everything smelled. Instead, they would be overwhelmed by an intense cloud of artificial fragrances and assume something had gone terribly wrong. To them, our bodies might seem like walking chemical storms. To us, they would simply smell of wood smoke and bare skin. Neither side would be wrong. Each would simply be judging cleanliness through the cultural lens they had grown up with. The truth is, there has never been a single universal standard for what clean is supposed to smell like. Every era and every culture has quietly created its own definition. And that leaves us with one final question. If cleanliness was never really about fragrance, then what exactly were our ancestors pursuing all those thousands of years? So by today's standards, were ancient humans truly clean? The answer is probably not. But does that mean they were primitive, careless, or incapable of recognizing and caring for their own bodies? Absolutely not. Our ancestors never wasted precious time chasing an artificially pleasant scent. They were occupied with a far greater and far more urgent goal, surviving long enough to greet the sunrise of another day. Perhaps. Then, the real question was never what our ancestors smelled like. The real irony is that somewhere along humanity's long journey toward comfort and convenience, it was we who quietly forgot what a real human being is actually supposed to smell like once every layer of artificial chemicals has been washed away.